This is part 4 of Custom Theme Development. In this exercise, we'll be focusing on typography. In order to control type via the theme.json file, you're going to need to understand and work with the following information. Typography is the section that defines fonts and text styling for your whole theme. Font families is an array, which is a list of font family groups that you're going to register. This is where you'll place the fonts that you want to include within your website. Within typography, we will include additional properties. One of them is font family. This is the CSS font family that you want browsers to use. You'll need to include name, which is the readable name that you or your users inside of the WordPress editor will see. The slug, which is the unique ID. This has to be lowercase and have no spaces. WordPress uses this internally. And fontFace. This is important as it will define the individual styles such as normal, italic, bold that belong to that particular font. And then inside each font face, you're going to describe it by specifying the font family. Again, you're telling it which font, the font style, whether it's normal or italic, and then the font weight. You'll also need to include source, which is an array of URLs that points to the actual font files. The other element that may be a little confusing when you're working with typography is you will define type-based choices in both settings and styles. So fonts in settings are defining what fonts are available for the entire theme. Think of this as if you're creating a menu of fonts that users can pick from. So you're going to register the font families that you want to use inside of the settings, typography, font family portion of your theme.json file. The result is going to be that WordPress users will be able to choose those fonts for different block types. When we define fonts inside of the style section of theme.json, we are defining how fonts are applied by default to certain elements or blocks. This is where you actually use the fonts that you made available. So you could say something like all paragraph text should use this particular font, and all headings should use this other particular font. WordPress is going to automatically apply these fonts to the site unless the user manually overrides them. I want you to think of it like this. If you go to settings, typography, and font families, you're defining the list of fonts that you can use. Inside the style portion of your theme.json file, and this is going to be under styles, elements, typography, you're going to define how by default we apply those fonts to the site. I think this will make more sense once we actually start to do this, so let's jump into our theme.json file and specify some choices in regards to fonts. For the website that I am building right now, I'm going to load 2 Google fonts. I'm going to use a font called Quattrocentro and a font called Intra. So inside of the theme.json file, to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to collapse the color section by clicking this little triangle in my editor. That'll just tighten up this area and kind of get it out of the way. We can do the same thing for template parts. And then what we want to do is inside of the settings key, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a new sub key. So after my color, I'm going to put a comma, and then we're going to go ahead and define our typography. We'll use our curly braces because this is again an object, and then we're going to go ahead and type in font families. This is where we're going to load the font families that we want to have access to. This will exist inside of the square braces because this is an array. And inside the square braces, I need another set of curly braces. So what we have so far is we have typography. This is the section that defines fonts and text styling for our whole entire theme. And then we have font families. This will be an array or a list of font groups that we're going to register. Inside this list, we'll go ahead and create two objects. These are going to be the two fonts that I want to load. We'll start off with the Quattrocentro font. Inside of font families, I'm going to add font family, and I'll use Quattrocentro, serif. This is going to specify that I want to use this particular font and have the fallback. So font family is the CSS font family that we want browsers to use. The name is the readable name for users. This is what users will see inside the WordPress editor. And the slug is the unique ID. It needs to be lowercase with no spaces that WordPress uses internally. Next, we're going to add fontFace. This will define the individual styles, such as normal, italic, and bold, that belong to that particular font. Inside of fontFace, we are going to describe the font. So we need to use font family. Again, we're telling it what font we want to use. We're going to add the font style. So this first one is going to be normal. The font weight will be 400, which is regular. And then the source is going to be an array of URLs that point to the WOFF2 file. This is the actual font file. I'm doing the same thing here, but I'm loading a bold or 700 font weight. And again, I need to point to that particular font. Now I'm going to put a comma here because we want to add our second font. I'm going to add the code for this, and I'm basically repeating the same process where I'm specifying the font family. This one is called Inter, and I'm going to go ahead and add fallback of sans serif. The name in WordPress will be Inter, and the slug name is going to be Inter. Then I'm going to load the fontFace arrays, and I am loading several different versions of this font. So I'm going to have a normal light weight at 200, a font style of italic and weight of 200, and then I'm doing the same thing for 400. And then finally, we just have a 700 or bold version of this font. As you can see, we end up with a lot of these curly braces and square brackets. This is where things can get a little bit confusing. So what I recommend that you do is when you're creating code like this, you can select all of your code and you can run it through a JSON validator. This will allow you to be able to identify errors before you actually push your code out. I'll be using this website called jsonlint.com. I'm going to paste my code into this website. And if I validate my code, it's going to say that the code is valid. So this assures me that I don't have any mistakes. But if I did have a mistake and I ran the code, you can see that it will identify this as being an error. It's going to tell me where this is occurring and what line it happens on. So this is a helpful way that you can ensure that your JSON file is working correctly. The other thing that I like to do is once I've added some of these things, I will collapse the triangles here, which is just going to consolidate my code. And then I can make sure that all of my curly braces and square brackets have matching opening and closing elements. So once I am assured of that, I can check it out and make sure that everything is working correctly before I collapse it. I can just make sure that everything is paired up in the appropriate way. And you can see in my case, it is. All right, that is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and we will save this file and let's see if this shows up in WordPress. So I'm going to jump into my WordPress project. Remember, at present, we don't have the option to add any sort of fonts to any of our elements. That is not an option that we have, but if we click refresh and we select something here, you can see that I have a new category called font. And if we select font, we have the choice between our Quattrocentro font or our Inter font. So this part is now working correctly, which is great. Now we'll add some options for font styles inside of our theme.json file. I'm going to save this header template part. And in order to show you this, I'm going to create some content in WordPress so we can see how this works. So I will go to one of my pages, and we already have this sample page. This sample page already contains a paragraph, and let's go ahead and add a couple of headings in here. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and add a heading above the paragraph. We'll make this an H1, and then we'll make a subheading as well. And as you can see, this is an H2, and then I have some paragraph settings in here, and this particular page has some quotes as well. Now that we have this page and we've saved it, if we try to view this page, I want to show you that none of the content is going to show up. And that is because we have not yet defined any content inside of our index.html template file. So let's go ahead and add that in as well. I'll open up the index.html template, and currently this is only displaying our header. So let's add some additional content. We'll be using WP group, and we're going to use a main element inside of this particular area. We will give it a class of site main. It is going to display the post title, which is going to be a heading of level 1, and then it'll display the post content. Now we've closed main, and then we're closing this group. I'm going to save my index file, and if we go back to the front end portion of WordPress and refresh our page, you can see that now the hello world text is showing up. And if we preview our sample page at this point, you can see that our content is now showing up here as well. It is worth mentioning that if we go into appearance, go into editor, and if we look at our index template, it's going to look like this. Now it looks like this block has some invalid content. Let's attempt recovery. Now everything looks fine. I think WordPress just needed to refresh this. If we use these 3 dots and we go to the code editor, it's going to display the code that we just added, and all of this looks fine. So I'm going to save this. And as you can see, nothing here has changed. It's just allowing us to see the content that we have added on each of our pages. So now that we have that here, let's return to modifying our typography. I'm going to go back to that sample page so that we can edit this, and let's change from our code editor to our visual editor. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some additional code to my theme.json file. So we'll go back to our theme.json, and obviously here is our typography information that we had added. I'm going to collapse this portion just to make this a little bit easier for us to see. And then we'll go ahead and we'll add in the style code that we're going to need. So styles is going to be at the same level as settings. I'll go ahead and create some of this code, and then we can chat about it. I'm going to place this code right here before template parts and after settings. I need to make sure I have a comma after my closing curly brace so that template parts will render correctly. And now let's talk about this new section of code that we just added. What we're doing here is we are defining styles, and within styles, we are defining typography. This is going to set the site-wide body font defaults. We're going to have our font family be set to Inter. This is the default font family for all of our body copy. We're going to have the font size be 18 pixels and the line height be 1.6. Then I'm going to use elements, and elements is where I can specify styles for particular elements. So in this case, I am targeting headings, and I'm saying that all my headings are going to be using the Quattrocento font. We're going to use a font weight of 700 and a line height of 1.2. In addition, I've added some specifications for links, and for my typography, I just want the text decoration to be underlined on all links. So this block of code should set our body copy text to Inter font, all of our headings to Quattrocentro, and our links should now be underlined. Let's go ahead and let's save this code. If we come back to WordPress and refresh the page, you will see that at this point, our custom font families are not showing up. It is possible to select certain elements and go ahead and apply the font. So if I did enter, you can see that that's applying. If I selected extra light, it turns into extra light. So it is possible to make these changes, but if we want this to happen at a global level, what we're going to do is we're going to need to add some additional CSS as well. So let's go back into our theme files. I'm going to go into style.css and we'll go ahead and we'll set some base font styles. For this example, I'm just going to go ahead and specify body. Then we'll specify our font family to be Inter. And if that's not available, I'll leave a fallback of sans serif. I'm going to change my font weight to be 400. And then for my headings, and for this example, I'll just do a group selector of H1, 2, and 3. And we're going to set our font family to our Quattrocentro, fallback of serif, and let's add font weight of 700. Now if we save our page and we return to WordPress and refresh our page, you can see that the body copy has now changed to a sans serif and our headings are displaying in the appropriate way. If you want to use the inspector, you can go in and we can see that for H1s, 2s, and 3s, we are loading the Quattrocentro font family. It is possible once we've set up these default settings to go ahead and override those settings. So if I select this particular heading and I change it to use a font of Inter, and we'll just change the appearance to be extra light, and we save this page and now refresh, you can see that this one headline is now being overwritten by those new settings. The final thing I want to point out to you is that you'll notice that our fonts are loading on the front end, but inside the WordPress editor, they are not loading. In order to do this, we need to enqueue the styles for the admin editor. We have to make sure that the custom styles are applied to the block editor, and we'll need to enqueue them in the functions file. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go back into my code editor. I will go to my functions.php. We'll just add a little comment here, and I'm going to create a function called enqueue editor styles. I'm going to just use add editor style, and I will specify my style.css file, and then I'll use the add action hook to go ahead and add this on initialization, and of course I'm calling this function. If we save our functions file now and go back into WordPress and refresh one of our pages, you will now see that the appropriate elements are being applied. And if I go to this one heading where we specifically overwrote it and come to typography and reset, it's going to be reset back to whatever those default styles are. So in this manner, our page in the front end is now taking on our new custom font styles, and we are also seeing the font styles being rendered in the back end as well. As you can see, being able to have full control over your website is very helpful. It's important that you spend some time with the theme.json file, and I would encourage you to start with just one font so that you can understand this, and then you might want to add an additional font or an additional font style. It does get a little bit confusing at times, but just take your time, make sure that all of the opening and closing brackets match up, and use that JSON validator to check your code if you do encounter any sorts of problems.